It is 1 p.m., so I'd like to begin on time. So welcome everybody to the Ledger Mania webinar. We're Ledger Mania. We're the game that makes accounting fun. Thank you for coming today to our webinar. Ledger Mania began operations in 2013 with an accounting board game designed to be played in class. In 2018, a little less than 2 years ago, we introduced our online game. Our company is dedicated to helping students learn the fundamentals of accounting. That is basically our goal. My name is Debbie Bloom. Hello, everybody. I'm the creator of Ledger Mania, which, believe it or not, came out in about 2006 as a version of Monopoly. And over the years, trying to get it going, I realized that it really didn't share much with Monopoly other than a game board and dice and squares. And one of the big problems that I found with Monopoly is that the goal of the game is wrong. The goal of the game is to accumulate wealth. I'm sorry, my husband just passed me a note. The goal of the game Monopoly is to accumulate wealth, but unfortunately, that's not what we want to teach our accounting students. We don't want to teach them that some random roll of the dice is going to help them win a game. We want them to be the best accountants. So the goal of Ledger Mania is to journalize, post, and to produce a balanced trial balance. So you win the game by being the best accountant, as opposed to accumulating wealth or some other measure that we don't want to measure them by. So just a little bit about my background. I have been teaching accounting since 1994 at the college level. I teach at both the community college and the university level. I have a master's degree in accounting. I also have a master's degree in mathematical finance, but please don't hold that against me. I'm a CMA, a CFM, CSCA, and I have a couple of data analytics certification. But my absolute love is teaching accounting, and that's what I hope to do for the rest of my life. So once again, thank you all for attending, and we're going to be offering all attendees who stay to the end a $10 Amazon gift card. So either make sure that you, well, you've already signed up through the Sign Up Genius, but make sure that you leave your email in the chat or sign up for Ledger Mania, the online game, which I will talk about in a moment, just to make sure that we get your Amazon.com gift card. So hold on a moment. I'm going to share the screen and just begin with a PowerPoint. But we'll go through this very quickly because I'm not going to go through PowerPoints. I want to show you the actual game. So Ledger Mania Online is a supplemental activity designed to support your online learning. One of the nice things about Ledger Mania is that it's auto-graded, so you can assign it as an assignment with very little for you to do as an instructor once you've created the game, which I'll show you how to do in just a few moments. You get detailed feedback to both the students and the instructor in terms of what they've done right or wrong, as well as their activity. So as I said before, students decide the cash effects of a transaction, then they're going to journalize and post the transaction. So it's very much an accounting simulation. And unlike most Monopoly games where the goal is to accumulate wealth, the object of Ledger Mania, you win the game by producing a balanced trial balance. Another nice thing about Ledger Mania Online is that once you assign a game, it's random which transactions each student gets. So when you assign a game, all of your students are not working on the same transaction set, they're all working on a different transaction set. They'll each have a different cash balance, a different accounts receivable balance, a different trial balance at the end, so they cannot copy from each other. That is one of the problems that I found with traditional accounting problem solving is that it actually encourages your students to be passive. When everybody has the same transaction set, the students know all I have to do is say, I don't know enough times, and the teacher will give me the answer, or the software will give me the answer, or my neighbor will give me the answer. But the random nature of the game combined with the competition makes the students necessary to do their own work, and they want to do their own work. One of the other problems that I found with traditional problem solving is that students get very disconnected from the transaction. They could be recording, paid salary expense and journalize that they're receiving cash because they're so disconnected from what's going on. So when you see me play Ledger Mania, you're going to see that before each transaction, the students have to decide whether they're receiving cash, paying cash, or maybe there's no cash, like a receivable or a payable. Now, Ledger Mania is also competitive. A leaderboard shows the highest performing students in the class, not their grades. It's all completely compliant, so it's not going to show anybody else's grades, but the students will see who are the top performing students in the class and where they are. Am I number 3? Am I number 7? Am I number 22? And it's shown by percentage of total points. So the more that they get right, the higher their grade is going to be. So here's some screenshots from Ledger Mania, the online game. But as soon as I get out of this PowerPoint in just a couple of slides, I'm going to show you an exact game. But on the first screen on the upper left, you can see that students actually handle cash online. So they have to figure out how much cash is involved in the transaction, whether they receive cash, pay cash, or as I said, a receivable payable would involve no cash, and they have to decide that before they go to the next screen. The next screen is on the bottom left, where we're going to go into the general journal. So very standard drop-down boxes for the accounts, so the students can see all the accounts. At the bottom of the screen, I'm going to show you there are buttons where the students can get some helpful tips, as well as a chart of accounts at all times. Once they've journalized the transaction, they move over to posting to the T accounts, and you can see that they can see the journal entry up on top while they're posting to the T accounts, and I'll show you in the actual game, the categories expand and contract to make it very easy for the students to be able to do this online. Now, the goal of Ledger Mania, as I said, is to produce a balanced trial balance, and this is the screen that I love the most. So you can have it set that the students fill in the T accounts on the left and the trial balance automatically fills out, or you can have them do both. I would recommend the automatic filling in because it is a lot of work to fill in each T account and then transfer the balances over. But you can see that the side-by-side nature ties together the T accounts and the trial balance, so the students really understand how they work together. Now, the students have 3 chances to balance their trial balance and close the books, and they gain a lot of points by being able to balance that trial balance for the first time. Now, Ledger Mania is not just something that you will play one time during the semester. There are a lot of different versions available for Ledger Mania online. So you can teach your students how to do service company transactions, just basically revenue and expenses and a couple of assets thrown in. We have a merchandising company transaction set. Both service and merchandising are available either with a corporation or a proprietorship, so it works with any book that you adopt. Merchandising brings in cost of goods sold. I'm sorry, my husband's, oh, am I not in the presentation? I thought I might not be. Hold on one moment. Is that better? Am I actually in the presentation now? Okay, so I'm sorry, my husband interrupted me with a note that I was showing the wrong screen. I was showing my screen as opposed to the PowerPoint presentation screen, but moving on. Merchandising company has cost of goods sold and receivables and payables. Then we have a not-for-profit company, hospitality company, an auditing transaction set, which is basically accounting corrections. And coming very, very soon, we're hoping within the next week, we're just waiting for our programmers to give us the go-ahead, but we have a set coming up for adjustments. And then we also have some high school drill sets. So you'll have a transaction set where the students only receive cash, or where the students only pay cash, or where there's only receivables and payables so they can practice one particular skill over and over again. Now, before I move on, I want to point out that all of these versions are available under the same price. So if you decide to adopt Ledger Mania online, you can assign games from any of these versions, as many games as you want, for the same price. So here is our website, which I'll show you again in a few moments, but we have instructor registration and student registration available at our website. Now, how to order Ledger Mania online. You can go to ledgermania.com. Instructors would click the tab for instructor registration. Now, once you register as an instructor, it's totally free for you to go in and play the game and check out the software. You can play whatever versions that you want, check out how the software works as a student, but students would register under this tab for student registration. Now, there are two ways that you can buy Ledger Mania. We do have individual licenses that are per student. The individual licenses cost $9.95 per student, and the students would pay with their own credit card. So after they register, they'd be bumped over to a screen where they put in their credit card, and then they would be able to see your class. We also have institutional licenses that are priced at a discount. It's about $8 to $9 per student, where what happens is after the students register, they're just bumped in without having to bring in their own credit card. So with the institutional licenses, the school would pay. With the individual licenses, the students would pay. For high schools, the licenses are for the entire academic year. So if your students sign up in August, they'll still be able to use the software in June for the same $9.95 price. And again, you can assign as many games as you want from as many versions as you want. So you can assign 20, 30 games if that's what you would like. Now, in case you're interested, I know that we're not going to be in class for a while, but Ledger Mania does have a board game. And let me tell you, the board game is a lot of fun in a class. If you ever see students being collaborative and laughing and joking around in class, that is around Ledger Mania. So with Ledger Mania, students handle cash, they journalize, and they post to a trial balance. I have a version of Ledger Mania, the in-class game board, that does LIFO FIFO with colored tokens, which is also included with the game, which, let me tell you, is a lot of fun and really helps the students learn LIFO and FIFO. So for the board game, we have the same transaction sets that we have available online, plus the LIFO FIFO version. But another nice thing with the board game is you can design your own transaction set. I have blank journals and ledgers out there. So if there's a skill that you would like to teach, we hope that's going to come very soon to the online version as well, where you can edit and design your own transaction set. Now, the last slide before we move on is this is a tip sheet that I developed for myself when I was in college because I could never remember debits and credits. So this is included in the board game, and it's also a pop-up window in the online game. So whenever students get confused, they can bring up this little tip card And notice that assets and expenses are on the left-hand side. They're the debit accounts, and this is what happens when we debit those accounts and when we credit those accounts. And the same thing on the right-hand side, the liabilities, equity, and revenue accounts. So before I move on, just give me a moment. Sharing my screen here. Oh, that didn't, hold on, I'm sorry. There we go. So before I move on, I'm going to unmute everybody and ask if anybody has any questions before we move on. So does anybody have any questions? Everybody good? Okay, well, the next thing on the agenda is to play the sample game. So once you're already registered, all you have to do at ledgermania.com is on the upper right-hand side, click login. And I've already set up a sample instructor. Oh, give me a second. I'm sorry. Let me mute everybody again. So now when you sign into Ledger Mania for the first time, you're going to get a welcome screen. So we can see here to play as a student, click view as learner. To begin using Ledger Mania, create a course and/or section, create a game, and share the course URL with your students through email or your learning management system. And notice when we start up, there's a quick start guide, a user guide, FAQs, and student instructions all available for you the first time. So I'm going to click OK. And for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to play a sample game. So to play a sample game, what I'm going to do over here is click View as Learner. Now, this is what your students will see when they log in, but they will not see the webinar. What your students will see when they log in for the first time is the practice game. We've put the practice game up there for all students, so they're not graded the first time they use the software. They can go in and play a service company version and get used to the debits and credits, and so not be have to use the software the first time when they're grading. Now, we've created this one transaction game for this webinar. So right now, I'm going to start the game. So notice it has some information. I'm going to click Start Game. And another nice thing about Ledger Mania is that it's scenario driven. So the students aren't just given a set of transactions, they're given a story about the company and why they're doing what they're doing. So in this case, they're trying to recover data after they lost all of their data. So their job is that they're being fed journal entries and they're just one little cog in the wheel. So I'm going to click Next once I can find my cursor. And you have student instructions. And now we're going to start the game. So you notice once I click Start Game, I have my first transaction, paid utilities expense, $310 cash. So the first thing that I am is I'm on my cash screen. So I'm going to put in my amount, which is $310. And now I have to decide whether I'm going to receive cash, pay cash, or there's no cash involved in the transaction. So I'm going to click Pay Cash and then click Next. Now, the software will not tell the student whether they're right or wrong. At this point, it will allow them to continue, and at the end, they'll get feedback as to what they've done correctly or incorrectly. So once I've decided the cash, I'm now at my second screen where I need to do the debits and credits. And notice when I scroll down, I have some buttons down here to help me. I have a chart of accounts. I have a list of all of the transactions that I've gone through so far, and that debit credit tip sheet that I showed you in the PowerPoint. So what I'm going to do here is to pay utilities expense, $310 cash. I'm going to debit utilities account 6,200, and I'm going to credit cash. Make sure that I have my debit and my credit, and put my $310 in the debit and my $310 in the credit, and then I'm going to click Next. Now, after I've journalized the transaction, I'm brought over to the T accounts. So the first time I go in, I get instructions. Please fill in all the T accounts and then click the Next button when you're done. So I click OK to take me back to the site. And as you notice below, all of the categories will expand and contract so the students can see the journal entry on the screen as they're doing the debits and credits in the T accounts. So I'm going to collapse until I see my expenses, and I'm going to debit my utilities expense for $310. And more lines are added as you do the journal entries. So if I had a second utilities expense, I'd have a second line there. And in Bank for Cash, you would even see a scroll bar. And then I'm going to go into my assets, and I'm going to credit cash for $310. Now, normally what you get at this point is a Next button, because what the students would do is cycle through. When you set up the game, you decide how many transactions they're going to do. 5, 10, 7, 12, it's whatever you decide. And I'm going to show you how to set that in just a couple of moments. So we decided just a one transaction game, but normally they'd get Next and they move on to the next transaction. Once they've journalized and posted all of the transactions, then they get the button View Trial Balance. So once I view the trial balance, I'm at the trial balance screen. I have instructions once again so the students know what they're supposed to do on the screen. And this is one screen that we worked an awful lot on to really help with the students' learning. So I have my cash. Notice I have my debit total of $26,500 and my credit total of $310. So I have to put in the correct ending cash balance of $26,190. I think that's correct, right? And notice how when I put that into my cash, it comes up automatically in the trial balance. So the students see how the T accounts work with the trial balance. So now I have to put all of my remaining balances in. So I'm going to put in my accounts receivable, prepaid insurance is 0, supplies inventory, 3,000, equipment, 11,500, and furniture and fixtures, 10,000. Now what I'm going to do is close up my asset category so I can still see my trial balance. Now I'm going to input my liabilities, 7,000 on the credit side, 9,500 on the credit side, 25,000 on the credit side, 30,000, 1,000 on the debit side, and 25,000 on the credit side. Next, I'll put in my revenue, which is just 44,000 of service revenue, and close up that category. And then finally, my expenses. So I have rent expense, utilities expense. So I have 4310 on the debit side and nothing on the credit side. So 4310 is my ending balance for utilities. Move on to interest, 1,500 on the debit side. Salaries, 11,000. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an intentional mistake. So for my miscellaneous expense, instead of putting the 1,000 on the debit side, I'm going to put the 1,000 on the credit side. I just want you to know that I know what I'm doing, that I'm doing this intentionally just to show you what happens. So after I've put in all of my account balances, I'm going to click the button at the bottom, click to total columns. and notice that it tells me that I have incorrect account balances that I don't balance. Now, the students can't go back and fix the journal entries and the postings that they've done, but they can go back, take a look at everything they've done, and try to correct the T account. So if they find that they're not balanced, they can print out all of their transactions, go through the paperwork, and see what they've done wrong. I actually know what I've done wrong in the expenses, so I'm going to go down, I'm going to take the $1,000 balance out of the credit, put it in the debit, and go back to my trial balance, and once again, click to total columns. Now it tells me that I'm balanced. So once I'm balanced, I click close the books, and I get my score. And not only do I get my score, I get my result as well. So when I click view results, I get a detailed listing of everything that I've done right and wrong. So the computer will tell me how many points I've gotten for each one and what I've got right and wrong. And we've actually weighted it very heavily towards balancing the trial balance. So that's how Ledger Mania works in action. Do I have any questions? So I'm going to unmute everybody for a moment and ask if anybody has any questions.
As an instructor, do we see a report view of the students? How do we get that data?
Yes, you get a very detailed grade book. Somebody is talking in the background. Could you?
Like I mentioned, I'm Megan O'Quinn. I'm actually the Director of Brand Management at IC.
Oh, I think I'm going to have to.
I help to oversee.
Sorry, Joey. Can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
As an instructor, what does the report look like for the student data? Is that something that we log into to see, or how is that given to us?
Yes, there's a grade book as well. And Dan, can you answer that as well?
Yes, you get a summary of what the student does. You do not get this detailed information as to what they got right and what they got wrong, but you do see their overall score. And there's also an activity report that's separate from the grade book that shows you how many times they logged in and how much time they spent playing each of the games. So there's a bit to track there, but no, you don't get this detail as to exactly what they did right and what they did wrong. But here again, my apologies. Here again, you could assign the game several times, though, if you felt the student needed to practice the same thing again.
I'm thinking from an instruction point of view, if I needed to know what students are struggling with, for example, managing cash, putting in the correct transaction, what is the best approach to have students PDF and send the report to me? I guess it would be helpful for me to be able to see what the report says so that I can change my support for them.
Yes, I think probably having the student PDF it back to you is probably short term, but I'm going to jot that down as no one's really brought that up before. They're usually good to see the grade for how the student did and how many times they tried and how much time they spent, which has been sort of a big deal to the instructors that have used the game so far. But I'll add that to my possible enhancements that the instructor should be able to see, the student, what they did right and what they did wrong.
I would think if these reports are being generated already, it should be relatively easy for the programmers to be able to make them visible to the instructor as well.
So very good question. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was about to say, great question. Any other questions before I move on?
Yes, I do have a question. So I went out there and I tried playing with it. How do I choose between a service company and a merchandising company? That's one of the questions I have.
I am about to show you how to create a game.
Okay.
So I would say within 5 or 10 minutes, your question will be answered.
Okay. And the other thing is I also looked at the student practice transactions, and I don't know if this was just in the practice transactions, but it seemed like a couple of the questions repeated themselves. Is that just in the practice transaction?
They should, no transaction should repeat within one game. If you had, let's say, 5 students, the 5 students, it's possible that 3 or 4 of them would get the same transaction, but it would not be possible for one student to get the same transaction in the same game.
Yes, the transactions are randomly selected. So we would find it very surprising if within the same game for the same student, they would get the same transaction more than once. That would be very surprising, and we thought we had a program so it wouldn't do that. But if you played the same game several times, the students might well see the same transactions, because here again, they're randomly selected across the game. So it's possible. And the more transactions you have in a game, say 10 transaction games, and you play that several times, there's a good chance you're going to see the same transaction once or twice.
Yeah, this was one, I just did the practice just to kind of get a look and feel of how to put in the transactions and that.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And then maybe it was just a fluke. I don't know. I did copy it to just because I had to just look at that and see. When I look back at the transactions, out of 10, 2 of them repeated, and I didn't understand that.
That is odd, because I know I checked that with the programmers, because that was actually vital for the adjustments version.
Okay.
Because if you got supplies expense, and adjusting supplies expense twice, or you got depreciation twice, the adjusting entry wouldn't make sense the second time, because you've already done it the first time, so the balances would already be adjusted.
Sure.
So I'm pretty sure I checked with them. I'm very confused about that. Dan, would you jot that down?
Yes, Gerald. Yeah, I'll follow up with our coders and find out what's going on there. You shouldn't see the same transaction within the same game. Yeah, so we'll get that fixed if that's not working right. Our apologies for that.
Okay, and then the last question is, can you choose more than 10 transactions in a game?
Yes, you can choose up to 20.
Okay.
And you're going to see that in just a moment as Debbie shows you how to set up the game.
Yeah.
All right. I'm waiting.
Thank you, Gerald.
Any other questions? Any other questions before we move on? Okay, so the next part of the webinar is basically I'm going to show you how to log in and how to create a game as an instructor. So you as instructors, you would click on instructor registration, and you just have to fill out a very simple form: your first name, your last name, your institution, email, how did you hear about us, and just click the I'm not a robot, and then create your instructor account. Now you'll be getting 2 emails. The first email will just confirm that you're registered, but the second email will activate you. Once you're activated, you have full instructor privileges. You can go in and you can play the game. The only thing is that you can create classes and all of those things, but just your students can't join in until either they have the institutional license or they purchase the individual licenses. Now, once you're logged in and activated and you log in for the first time, this is the screen that you see. So you see this instructor category. And as I said before, you click View as Learner from this first screen that you go in if you'd like to try out the game as a learner. But the first thing that you would want to do is create a courser section. So you notice on the left-hand side under Account Management, the first link is Create Course Section. So I'm going to click Create a Courser Section. We have a few defaults here. It's just the pre-built course. The only course that you can copy is Ledger Mania, so there's only one option there. Now you can choose the instructor category, or you could create a new category. I would recommend that you create a new category by semester or maybe by school if you're doing multiple schools, because otherwise all your games and classes will be under the instructor category, and over time it'll get very cluttered. So I'm going to create a category for Fall 2020. My course ID is going to be ACC. 101 for Accounting 101. My section is going to be 001. You could put in a course description if you'd like as well. For the course name, I'm just going to put in Principles of Accounting. Now, a couple of defaults here. If I click yes over here, you'll get an email every time a student enrolls. We have a default time zone for Eastern time, but you can change the time zone if you'd like. If you teach in the Midwest or the West Coast, you don't have to deal with Eastern time. So now I'm going to click next. Now there's only one content to copy here, so I just click next. And it just shows me all the defaults. And I click save. And right now I'm going to click do not show again because we don't need this anymore. So you see now I have my category fall 2020 and I have my new Principles of Accounting class. Now, if I'd like to set up a class, set up a game, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click manage or I click game board and that brings me to the same place. So I click game board and right over here, here's the practice game. And notice that this game status for the practice game is published. Another thing that we have is a quick play service company 10 transaction game. So if you're having trouble as an instructor getting used to Ledger Mania, what we've done is we've created a game that you can assign very, very quickly without having to go through a lot of the different screens. But notice that this game status is pending. The game would actually have to be published in order for your students to see it. So now to create a new game, on the button on the left, I'm going to click create a new game. And this was your question before on how do I play a game from the different categories. So once you click create new game, you see here that you can create a new game from any of the different versions that we have available. So I can choose to use the merchandising proprietorship, or I can choose to use the auditing corrections, or the not-for-profit. And again, as many games as you would like during the semester from as many categories as you want. So if you wanted to assign 5 games from the service company corporate during the semester, that would be fine. If you wanted to assign 5 games from every category, again, that's fine. It's all included. There's no more to pay once you've adopted Ledger Mania. So I'm going to use a merchandising proprietorship. And I'm going to go across and I'm going to make sure that I'm on the same line. I'm going to click use. And here's where you can set a lot of the defaults for the game. So right now the default name is merchandising proprietorship. I could change that name to whatever I wanted. October game, game for principles of accounting, fall game, whatever it is that I want. It's using the merchandising proprietorship game board. Now, here's a couple of things that you do want to know about in the setting. You can either have no game dates, in which case they have all semester to do it, or you can set game dates. If you choose to set game dates, you have to set a date that it's available and a date that it closes. So right now I'm going to switch back to no game dates, otherwise I'd actually have to set dates. If you have set game dates, you can also allow late submissions, and you can also allow multiple attempts, and you can set the number of attempts, but again, those are only available if you set game dates. They're not available if you set no game dates. Now, in this area down here, this colored area over here, game board, this is where it assigns points. We must have spent, what was it, 4 or 5 months with the programmers working on the points for the game. So we really spent a lot of time working on it. I would recommend that you not play with it, but it is very heavily weighted towards the trial balance. So if you don't balance the trial balance, you lose a lot of points. So if you feel like changing the weights, it actually can be changed. But again, I would recommend not because we spent a lot of time on the points. But down here at the bottom of the game board are two very important buttons. Right over here is the number of transactions. So notice I can create any number of transactions from 2 up until 20. Okay, and I believe that there are 26 transactions to choose from in each game set. Now, release score to learners. Down here, the defaults are the things that you definitely want. Release score to learners, yes. You know, there's an option where they don't get their scores. Display in grade book, yes. Highest scores. You can view the score as a raw score, but the points don't make a lot of sense. You much prefer it to display as a percentage. Activate game. Now, these down here are important. Activating game is very important. Publishing the game, and the game can be published to selected learners or to the entire class. So if you felt like certain students needed additional practice in cash or merchandising transactions, you can assign the game to select learners. So now I'm just going to click Save Game. And you notice here I have my merchandising proprietorship game available now under my courses. And notice the game is published. So if I go to view as learner, you can now see my merchandising proprietorship game for the student. Okay, going back to Ledger Mania, the next thing that I wanted to show you when you're at this My Courses screen, when you click the Manage button, this is where you get the URL link that you can share with your students. So once again, if you get an institutional license, you would just send this link out either in an email or post it to your learning management system. The students would register for the class and they would just be brought right into the class. So every time that they register, that they log in, they would just be brought right to your class. If you decide to have individual licenses, the students would go to that link, they would register, and then in the next screen, they would be prompted to pay. And then once they pay, they just go log in and they would go automatically to your class. This is what the grade book looks like on this tab. But right now I'm the only student, and you can see here that I get detailed feedback as to which games that I've played and what my score is on each game. And finally, we have the tab for View as Learner, where again, you can go in and take a look at everything that you've assigned and play the game yourself as View as Learner. Okay, so at this point, I think I have gone through just about everything with Ledger Mania. The last thing that I wanted to point out is, once again, when you're at the Ledger Mania homepage, student registration here is where students register for the first time. Instructor registration is where instructors register for the first time. Once you're registered, click Login. The last thing that I want to point out is at the website, when you click the online game, we have all sorts of videos available on how to create a new game, how to log in, how to send the URL to your students, how to create a new game. So you don't have to remember every single thing from this webinar. There are video instructions out there on how you can get started immediately in using Ledger Mania, basically as soon as your students are registered.